When you're looking for a UPS, you're not just after a list of numbers, you want something that actually sits quietly in your server rack, keeps your gear alive when the lights flicker, and doesn't drain your budget the moment you plug it in. That's why the hesitation feels real. You've probably read a handful of glossy specs and wondered if any of them really solve the everyday headache of a sudden power loss. Maybe you've already had a cheap unit die after a single outage, or you're nervous about spending too much on a model that looks impressive on paper but turns out to be a maintenance nightmare. What you need is a reliable, easy to live with UPS that just works, and the APC Smart UPS 1500VA Lithium-ion with SmartConnect promises exactly that. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest thing that sets this unit apart from the sea of older, lead-acid UPSs is the lithium-ion battery pack. Those batteries hold a charge longer when the unit sits idle, meaning you won't have to replace the battery every year or two like you would with a traditional UPS. In a typical office or small data center, that translates to less downtime for maintenance and a lower total cost of ownership. The 1500VA/1350W rating is solid for a 3U rack-mount chassis, so you can comfortably protect a single server, a small network switch stack, or a workstation with a couple of monitors. The pure sine wave output is also a relief if you've ever run a device that complained about dirty PowerThink audio laptops, lab equipment, or modern CPUs that can be finicky with simulated sine wave outputs. Those devices will see smooth, clean power, and you avoid the occasional reboot that some cheaper UPSs cause. Who should consider this UPS? If you run a remote office or a home lab where you can't rely on a generator, and you have a handful of critical devices that need uninterrupted power, this is a good fit. The SmartConnect remote monitoring adds a layer of confidence. You can set up alerts on your phone or laptop, and the unit will report its status over a secure cloud portal. That means you don't have to be physically next to the rack to know if the battery is low or if there's an overload condition. For IT administrators who manage multiple locations, the ability to monitor several units from a single dashboard can save a lot of time. On the flip side, if you're looking for a UPS that can handle a full rack full of servers, networking gear, and storage arrays, you'll quickly run into capacity limits. The 1500VA rating is great for small setups, but it won't keep a multi-U rack humming for long. Also, because this model relies on lithium-ion technology, you'll pay a premium upfront compared to a comparable lead-acid model. If your budget is tight and you have the ability to service the batteries regularly, a cheaper lead-acid UPS could make sense. Lastly, the unit is a 3U form factor, which is taller than a typical 1U UPS but still slimmer than many larger rack-mount alternatives. If you have extremely limited rack space, you might need to plan for that extra depth. Now let's talk about the practical strengths that show up day to day. The LCD screen is straightforward and actually tells you the most important numbers without scrolling through menus: current load in VA and watts, input and output voltage, and battery charge level. In a real office, you can glance at the display during a meeting and see, for example, that you're running at 30% load, leaving ample headroom for future expansion. The unit also has an automatic voltage regulation (AVR) feature, which smooths out minor sags and spikes without dipping into battery. That means the battery only kicks in when there's a real outage, preserving its life for the occasions that truly matter. Another often overlooked advantage is the short depth design. In tighter racks, depth can be a limiting factor, especially when you're stacking equipment behind a server. The Smart UPS's shallow footprint lets you squeeze it in without pushing your servers back too far, which is a real win when you're trying to keep cable runs short and organized. The included mounting rails make installation a quick job. Most installers will have the UPS bolted to the rack in under 10 minutes, and the unit's front panel remains accessible for any future adjustments. Real-world use cases help illustrate the value. Imagine a small business that runs a point-of-sale system, a desktop terminal, and a network switch. A brief neighborhood power outage would normally shut down the POS, potentially losing sales data and frustrating customers. With this APC Smart UPS, the switch stays up, The desktop gets enough backup to finish the current transaction, and the system gracefully shuts down within the 10-minute battery window. The owner walks away with zero data loss and one satisfied customer. In a home lab scenario, a hobbyist who experiments with virtual machines and a small NAS can keep the NAS online for about 6 minutes of power loss, enough time to let the OS flush caches and shut down.